Spanish colonization of the Americas. Spanish explorers were the first Europeans, following the Norse, to arrive in what is now the United States. After Christopher Columbus's voyages, starting in 1492, which established Spanish claims in the Caribbean, including present-day U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and parts of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Juan Ponce de León landed in Florida in 1513. Spanish expeditions soon ventured to the Appalachian Mountains, the Mississippi River, the Grand Canyon, and the Great Plains. In 1539, Hernando de Soto conducted a thorough exploration of the southeast. And the following year, Francisco Coronado traveled from Arizona to central Kansas in search of gold. Horses that escaped from Coronado's expedition spread across the Great Plains, leading Plains Indians to become skilled horse riders within a few generations. Over time, small Spanish settlements evolved into significant cities, including San Antonio, Albuquerque, Tucson, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Dutch colonization of the Americas. In 1609, the Dutch East India Company dispatched explorer Henry Hudson to find a northwest passage to Asia. To exploit the North American fur trade, the company established New Netherland in 1621. Initial growth was slow due to Dutch mismanagement and conflicts with Native Americans. After purchasing Manhattan Island from the Native Americans for a reported sum of $24, the Dutch named the land New Amsterdam, which became the capital of New Netherland. The settlement quickly grew, and by the mid-1600s, it had become a key trading hub and port. Although the Dutch were Calvinists and established the Reformed Church in America, they were generally tolerant of other religions and cultures, and traded with the Iroquois to the north. The colony acted as a barrier to British expansion from New England, leading to several conflicts. In 1664, the British captured the colony, renamed it New York, and the capital became New York City. New Netherland left a lasting impact on American cultural and political life, particularly in its legacy of religious tolerance, pragmatic trade practices in urban areas, and rural traditionalism, as reflected in stories like Rip Van Winkle. Notable Americans of Dutch descent include Martin Van Buren, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, and the Frelinghuysen's. Swedish settlement. During the early years of the Swedish Empire, Swedish, Dutch, and German investors established the New Sweden Company to trade furs and tobacco in North America. The company's inaugural expedition, led by Peter Minuit, formerly governor of New Netherland from 1626 to 1631, who left due to a dispute with the Dutch government, arrived in Delaware Bay in March 1638. The settlers founded Fort Christina at the location of present-day Wilmington, Delaware, and negotiated treaties with local indigenous groups to acquire land on both sides of the Delaware River. In the subsequent 17 years, 12 additional expeditions brought settlers from the Swedish Empire, which included parts of modern Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Norway, Russia, Poland, and Germany to New Sweden. The colony established 19 permanent settlements and numerous farms, extending into present-day Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. In 1655, New Sweden was absorbed into New Netherland following a Dutch invasion during the Second Northern War. French and Spanish. In 1524, Giovanni da Verrazzano became the first European to sail into New York Harbor and Narragansett Bay when he landed in North Carolina. During the 1540s, French Huguenots established a settlement at Fort Caroline, near present-day Jacksonville, Florida. However, in 1565, Spanish forces led by Pedro Menendez destroyed the French settlement and founded Saint Augustine. Augustine, the first permanent Spanish settlement in what would become the United States. While most French settlers were based in Quebec and Acadia, now part of modern Canada, their extensive trade networks with Native Americans across the Great Lakes and Midwest extended their influence. French colonists also established farming communities along the Mississippi and Illinois rivers, which provided grain for settlements along the Gulf Coast. Additionally, the French set up plantations in Louisiana and established the cities of New Orleans, Mobile, and Biloxi. British colonization of the Americas. The early British colonies were founded by private ventures aiming for profit and faced significant challenges, including starvation, disease, and conflicts with Native Americans. Many of the immigrants were motivated by the desire for religious freedom, escape from political persecution, displacement due to the Industrial Revolution, or the pursuit of adventure and opportunity. Between the late 1610s and the Revolutionary War, the British transported an estimated 50,000 to 120,000 convicts to their American colonies. First settlement in Jamestown. The first successful English colony, Jamestown, was founded by the Virginia Company in 1607 along the James River in Virginia. The colonists, focused on finding gold, were poorly prepared for life in the New World. Captain John Smith played a crucial role in stabilizing the colony during its first year, but Jamestown fell into chaos and nearly failed when he returned to England 2 years later. In 1612, John Rolfe began cultivating tobacco from the West Indies, and by 1614, the first shipment of tobacco reached London. Within a decade, tobacco became Virginia's primary source of revenue. In 1624, following years of disease and conflicts with Native Americans, including the Powhatan attack of 1622, King James I revoked the Virginia Company's charter and transformed Virginia into a royal colony, New England Colonies. New England was initially settled mainly by Puritans escaping religious persecution. The Pilgrims, who set sail for Virginia on the Mayflower in 1620, were diverted by a storm and ended up at Plymouth. There, they established a social contract known as the Mayflower Compact. During their first winter in Plymouth, roughly half of the Pilgrims perished. Similar to Jamestown, Plymouth faced challenges of disease and starvation, but the local Wampanoag Indians helped the settlers by teaching them how to cultivate maize. Plymouth was succeeded by the Puritans, who established the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. They retained a charter for self-governance, independent of England, and elected John Winthrop, one of the colony's founders, as governor for much of its early years. Roger Williams, who disagreed with Winthrop's treatment of Native Americans and his religious intolerance, founded the colony of Providence Plantations, later known as Rhode Island, on principles of religious freedom. New England emerged as a hub of commerce and industry due to its challenging, mountainous soil, which made farming difficult. The region utilized its rivers to power grain and sawmills, and its numerous harbors greatly facilitated trade. As a result, tightly knit villages formed around these industrial centers, with Boston growing into one of America's most significant ports. Middle colonies. In the 1660s, the middle colonies of New York, New Jersey, and Delaware were established on the former Dutch territory of New Netherland, and these colonies became known for their significant ethnic and religious diversity. During this period, the Iroquois of New York, bolstered by years of fur trading with Europeans, formed the powerful Iroquois Confederacy. The last of the Middle Colonies, Pennsylvania, was founded in 1681 by William Penn as a refuge for religious dissenters, including Quakers, Methodists, and the Amish. Philadelphia, the colony's capital, rapidly grew into a major commercial hub, featuring bustling docks and brick houses. While Quakers settled in the city, German immigrants began to populate the Pennsylvanian hills and forests, and Scots-Irish settlers pushed into the far western frontier. Southern colonies, the predominantly rural, Southern colonies were distinct from the more urbanized New England and Middle colonies. After Virginia, the second British colony established south of New England was Maryland, founded in 1632 as a refugee for Catholics. Both Virginia and Maryland developed economies centered around yeoman farmers and large-scale planters, with the latter establishing extensive plantations in Virginia's Tidewater region that relied heavily on slave labor. In 1670, the province of Carolina was founded, and Charleston emerged as the region's major trading port. While Virginia's economy focused on tobacco, Carolina had a more diverse economy, exporting rice, indigo, and lumber as well. In 1712, Carolina was divided into North and South Carolina. The final of the 13 colonies, Georgia, was established by James Oglethorpe in 1732 as a buffer against Spanish Florida and as a reform colony for former prisoners and the impoverished. Religion. Religiosity saw significant growth following the First Great Awakening, a religious revival that swept through the 1740s under preachers like Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield. This movement introduced a heightened focus on the outpouring of the Holy Spirit and conversions, instilling new believers with a fervent devotion to God. The revival meetings, which were central to this new evangelicalism, carried its influence into the early Republic and paved the way for the Second Great Awakening in the late 1790s. During the early phases, Southern evangelicals, including Methodists and Baptists, advocated for religious freedom and the abolition of slavery, converting many enslaved people and even recognizing some as preachers. Government. Each of the 13 American colonies had its own distinct governmental structure. Generally, a governor appointed from London oversaw the executive administration, while a locally elected legislature was responsible for voting on taxes and enacting laws. By the 18th century, the American colonies experienced rapid growth due to low mortality rates and abundant land and food resources. The colonies became wealthier than many regions in Britain, drawing a continuous stream of immigrants, particularly teenagers who arrived as indentured servants. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, then like and comment on video and subscribe. People of History channel for more histories. Don't forget to press the bell icon.